right, we are going where?
Back to school shopping.
This is the Playoffs for Parenting, aka getting ready to get back to school.
As we get ready for back to school.
Doesn't matter your income, your race, your background, whether you have a disability or not.
Our public schools are a place where all kids feel like they belong.
My child.
My children.
My family.
My friends' kids. My community.
All students.
All students.
All students belong in a great public school.
Let's get ready for back to school at nea.org/backtoschool.
I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. Welcome back to the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. I'm your host, Alice, and I'm joined as always by my wonderful co-host, Brett. Hey, Brett.
Thank you, Alice. I'm so wonderful. I really appreciate your heartfelt descriptor tonight.
Has nothing to do with you, obviously, because I am filled with wonder today because we are joined by an incredible prosecutor that you guys are going to absolutely love hearing from. Allison Healey, thank you so much for being here with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay, Allison, I'm going to let you get into it, but people need to know you're currently the Harford County State's attorney in Maryland. Yeah. And most recently, you've been all over the news because you were the prosecutor on the Rachel Morren case. A 37-year-old mother of 5 did what most of us aspire to do. She went out for a jog and tragically was met with incredible brutality, violence, and her life was ended by someone who actually was not only in this country illegally, but was wanted in his home country for murder as well, and had also committed other atrocities before being prosecuted and found by your office. I know this is just but one of many cases you've worked on in your career, but thank you for coming on our show today to talk about your career and also Rachel's case.
Of course. Happy to do it.
So those of you who are just listening, we feel very bad. So Brett and I, we record late at night and we asked Allison to come on the show, and she is an hour later than us. Not only did she say yes, she went back to her office. This, guys, is what a public servant does. They go back to their office like in the dead of night to be able to tell you how justice is done, because it's not done easily. It's done by hard work, late nights, just like you're seeing here tonight. So kind of with that, Allison, can you give us a little bit of a background? I mean, how did you become a lawyer?
Sure. So interestingly, my whole life, I was going to be a teacher. If you'd asked me growing up, it was always I was going to be a teacher. I went to Goucher College here in Towson, Maryland for undergrad. I was an elementary education major. My junior year of college, actually between my junior and senior year, I can vision it. I was in Ocean City with my parents for our family vacation. And I said, I think I might want to go to law school one day. And they were like, yep, that's great. First round was on us, second round's on you. So I was like, okay, that's fine. So my plan was I would teach and maybe go at night, what have you. So then I would say after my next semester, I did my student teaching and it just wasn't what I expected it to be. So I said, oh, well, I guess I'm doing law school now. So I sort of U-turned and, I went to law school. I took, bought like the Princeton Review prep book for the LSATs and studied from that for 6 weeks and very quickly turned path. I applied to law schools. I went to University of Baltimore. I graduated in December of 2006. It was 3.5 years. I had my son, so I took a semester off when I had him. And then I always knew throughout my law school career, my concentration was in criminal law. I always knew I wanted to be a prosecutor. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't like SVU and all the shows that I watched on TV that sort of got me interested in it. And so I always knew I wanted to be a prosecutor. So I was very fortunate that right out of law school, I was hired here in September. I graduated took the February bar, got the results. And in September of 2006, I was hired here in Harford County, where I grew up. It's my hometown. So I worked here for a little over 12 years, rose from district court all the way up through the ranks. Eventually, I became the supervisor of the domestic violence unit here in the office. So did everything from murder, rape, all of those while supervising the unit here. And then in 2018, 2018, we had an election. My boss was retiring. Unfortunately, the person in our office who ran, actually, who's now my deputy state's attorney, did not win the election. So those of us, very commonly they bring in their own people. So those of us who were high up lost our jobs. So during that 4 years, I opened my own practice, did a little bit of criminal defense, a little bit of family law, mostly those two. I had really good relationships with our law enforcement here from the 12 and a half years that I was a prosecutor. And over that time, they were reaching out because they just didn't feel like things were going well. They didn't feel like Harford County was, the place that it traditionally was, being tough on crime and that kind of stuff. So they knew that I was thinking about running. And so they sort of encouraged me. They were like, we really want you to do it. You'll have our support. And so ultimately, when I ran, I did have their support. I had the backings of all the unions here. Won the election in 2022, took office in January 2023.
Wow. That's what I'll say first. I have two comments about this. Number one, something you said that most people out there listening don't know, which I always thought is the stupidest thing I've never understood.
I know what you're going to say, and you're right.
This notion that you win an election, you become the head of the office, and the first thing you do is get rid of all your experienced talent. Like you come in and just take out everybody who knows what they're doing. I've never understood that.
I agree.
It's absurd, but you're right. It happens in almost every DA's office around the country.
It's actually funny because everybody just assumed, and I think with some pressing that from the person that I defeated in the election that maybe I was going to do that. So we came to the office actually with 22 vacancies because everyone left.
Oh, wow.
Thinking I was going to fire everybody. Like when it comes to prosecutors, I didn't fire a single attorney in this office when I came in. So I agree with you. It's wild because why would you get rid of the people that are most experienced that, have important cases I don't understand it, but you're right. It happens all the time.
The second thing I want to say is people always ask us how we do it. Like, how do we do all these things, balance family and everything else? And I just hope everybody who asks that question is listening to you, because that is so impressive that you did all that while raising a family, going to law school, pursuing your dream. You were able to balance all those things.
So when I was running, I actually now have a blended family. I have 5 children living in my house.
Wow. What are the ages?
So now they are 22, almost 21, 20, 16, and 13.
That is a span. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Really.
And actually our middle, so our third, it's my stepson. He's actually a cadet now at the sheriff's office and is going to be entering the academy in March. It's really cool.
That's amazing.
This is truly amazing. And so many times we'll see political heads who run for these heads of offices, but you really grew up in this prosecutor's office. You were a line attorney. You've done all of these cases. You were boots on the ground supervisor, and now you're the head of the office.
100%.
What is that transition like to go from line attorney, who's boots on the ground, to being the supervisor of the entire office?
Sure. So, I was lucky. I was lucky that I was a supervisor, so I knew how things had gone. And I was also very lucky that, so when our boss was retiring, he was getting older, and then our deputy state's attorney was running for election. Our other deputy state's attorney was running for a judgeship. She actually is a judge here in circuit court now, which next in line, we had trial team leaders at the time. I was one of them in addition to being this. So they were all off doing a variety of things. So in those months, before I left the office, I was doing a lot of administrative stuff as well, scheduling with the court and things like that. So I didn't get as much of the, the budget and the HR side of things, it wasn't quite like that, but it did give me some of the experience with sort of the inner workings, which is good. But I knew, what was important to me, what I thought was important to the office, so I came in, and I knew, obviously tough on crime. I know what our jurisdiction stands for. I know what I stand for. So that was all very important. And then from my experience, the other thing that is huge to me is just positive work environment, right? We believe here that good work-life balance is important. We believe that, happy employees make better employees. So those were sort of the things that we implemented our policies just to make sort of those goals and that mission, become a reality.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way.
Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
And kind of with that said, can you give folks an idea of the size and workload of your office? So you said you came in with 22 vacancies. How many attorneys are in your office? And if you could estimate kind of what is y'all's load in a given year?
So all of those weren't attorneys. Most of them were, but not all of them. And I don't actually remember the breakdown of the vacancies, but we have 83 employees currently. 30 of them are attorneys. So that's about where we are. So we have 9 attorneys, I think, in our district court unit. Then we have a prayer for jury trial unit, and then our felony unit. And then, of course, the domestic violence and child advocacy center attorneys.
And do you have a general load or number of cases that, those are so hard because there are so many more investigations than you bring to grand jury, than you bring to, ultimate conviction. But do you have a general load?
So I would say our felony prosecutors probably average around 25-ish to 30 felony cases at a time, and that can fluctuate down and up a little bit, depending on what's happening in the county. But the felony prosecutors handle about that many. I would say in a year in circuit court, including our prayers for jury trials, we're probably seeing almost 2,000 cases probably a year, maybe 1,800 in a year. And then district court obviously is way, way, way more because it's all the misdemeanors. So they're handling thousands and thousands of cases a year.
I think that's just so helpful to put into perspective because obviously when people spend all of their time on one case in true crime, they forget that why did these investigators or these attorneys not do X, Y, and Z? The amount of time we spend on one case, imagine if it were 20 to 30 cases that you had the burden of proof.
Yeah, right. That's right. That's right.
And so it's helpful, I think, to hear real prosecutors see what the actual load is. And as you say, there's only 24 hours in a day. You have to eat, you have to sleep, and it would be nice to see the sunlight in your family at some point. Right. So thank you for giving us kind of that insight into what it's like to be a prosecutor. And can you say kind of what's a day in the life of you right now where you sit?
Well, so right now I'm actually working on the sentencing for my Joppatown High School shooting that I handled because those 2 trials actually ended up being sort of back to back. It was a tough couple months for me because, you can't really say to the court, oh, you have that date available, but that's only 30 days after the Rachel Morren homicide. Like that's not a thing. So they were literally, I think we got the verdict. I want to say it was like maybe the 16th of April. I can't remember exactly, but it was mid-April. And then that trial started May 20th. But it depends on the day. I handle cases. My chief of administration, at this point has said I have to ask her permission to keep cases because she's like, you have other things you have to do. And I'm like, but I just want to go to court and try cases. So, it depends, but I try to handle maybe a handful to 10 cases, myself a year. I like to be in the courtroom. I think it's good to lead by example and, have my employees see the best practices happening in the courtroom. So I do a lot of courtroom work. On other days we're handling budget stuff, personnel issues, grants, we have those through state. We're considered like a medium-sized jurisdiction here in Harford County, for Maryland at least. So, it depends on the day. But I am in court probably a handful of days a month at least. And sometimes it's just a couple hearings, sometimes it's trials. It just depends. But then, we have all the grant personnel, all the other things that come along, with running an 83-person office.
So transitioning to the Rachel Morren case. So that was in August of 2023.
Yep.
As Alice said, she's a mother of 5. She goes out for a run. The number of times you see somebody's going out for a run, they're trying to do some exercise, they get attacked. It happens far too much. And this was one of those cases, brutal murder. I mean, she's on, it's like the Ma and Pa trail, right?
Yep.
You should be safe on the Ma and Pa trail.
It's a beloved trail in our county. I mean, so many people, I think, Judge Curtin said it best in sentence, it is a place people go for wellness. Like people are on that trail all the time, walking, running, just there are some benches, there's a stream, people are on that trail all the time. And it is a beloved place in our county. And for Rachel, it was, she was there like every day. She loved that place. She went there every single day, pretty much.
And you had been elected by then, right?
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
So you were on duty.
Yep.
Well, tell the listeners a little bit, and I know it differs from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. What is sort of your involvement when you have a crime like that? When would you become involved in the investigation?
So interestingly, it even differs case to case. It kind of depends. A lot of times, the police will notify me something's going on. In this case, I obviously knew that she was missing, I was seeing the social media posts. I was seeing things like that. I got the call from the sheriff's office. She had been located deceased in the drainage culvert, or the tunnel, as we call it, on the trail. And I was at my house and I was like, my gut, I don't really know the main reason, but I think ultimately it was because of the vast area of the crime scene, but just something in my gut said you should go out. Like, this is just one you should go out. I don't always do it. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And I was sort of going back and forth. I think I should go. I think I should go. And my significant other hilariously said, I don't even know why we're having this conversation. You know you're going to go, so just go. And so I was like, you're right. And it was so hot that day. It was hot as Hades that day. So I had on shorts and a t-shirt because I'm like, I can't go. And you're on the Mom Pa trail. It's a nature trail. It's a hiking trail. So I was tennis shoes, jean shorts, and, a t-shirt. So I went to the trail immediately, and I actually got there before her body had even been removed from the scene in this particular case.
And so when you show up on the scene, obviously there's investigators cordoning off.
Yep.
Maybe the coroner's not even there yet if her body hasn't been removed. So what happens there? When you're there, what is law enforcement doing? Where do you step in? How do you interact with them? And what are you going to see?
Right. One of the biggest things for me was this was not a crime scene like a house or a building where the pictures I could get sort of the surroundings easily because it is such a big trail, right? And I just felt like part of me going was that I felt like I needed to see it directionally, understanding that there are various entrances to the trail. I know the trail, but not as well as a lot of people do. So I do now, but then. And so I was like, you know what, I think it will help me ultimately in prosecuting this case in understanding everything. So I showed up, I actually pulled in, she parked on what we call the William Street lot. There's another lot that you can get to where she ultimately was found by the historical mansion. It's called the Dendron. So I parked there. I told them I was on my way. They had a deputy meet me at the parking lot and drive me down on the gator to basically where she was located. And then I just had to walk. Once I got there, they basically stopped at the place that ultimately was where the attack had started on the trail. As we walked towards the tunnel, they were showing me the blood trail they had found, sort of that really documented the entire trail of where she was drugged, which was off to the right and then down the left by the creek and into the tunnel. And so I am walking down, I see it. The trail is like drops of blood. You really have to look. It's not huge clumps of blood. It's just drops of blood going down. And then ultimately we get to a series of rocks that are about probably 3/4 of the way down where they're just blood soaked. I mean, they're just soaked in blood. We kind of get over that little ridge and that's where you can see into the tunnel. And she is unclothed. Her shorts were around her one ankle. Sports bras pulled up, kind of around her neck. So completely unclothed. She was missing a shoe, severely beaten, just head wounds and wounds all over her face, or she had been severely beaten. Obviously, we immediately thought sexual assault was in play, given the fact that she was unclothed. She had been out in the heat, in the elements. There was probably an inch of water that was running down that culvert from the creek, sort of underneath of her. And as you got all the way down to the other end of the tunnel, which was probably about 200 feet, it got deeper. But where she was, it was a small, but they were worried about a series of things at that point. And the biggest decision, which ended up being huge for our case, was that the ME was on his way and almost there when I got there. They were concerned about both the heat and the water that she had been laying in, and also that once she was transported, she was going to be put in a body bag, right, and transported. We were going to have to lug her up the trail, over a hill, into wherever they were going to park. They parked the ambulance up on the bypass. And so we were concerned that that plus the cold air was going to destroy any DNA evidence that there may have been in the case. So we ultimately were sort of forced to make a decision about what to do about taking DNA swabs on scene. And usually they will be taken at the medical examiner's office, and we will have, if we're going to do it on scene, a conversation with the medical examiner's office. So the ME forensic investigator gets there. We have this conversation. He can't get through. There's no signal because we're in a tunnel, on a trail. And so ultimately, it was good that I was there because they looked at me and they're like, what do you want us to do? Because, ultimately, we don't want this to be a problem. And I said, it's not a problem, and so I said, take the swabs. So they did. So ultimately, a couple of those plus a couple that they did take in autopsy ended up being really the keys to this case.
I was just going to say, making those tough calls. That's heavy as the head that wears the crown, right? I mean, because if you make the wrong call, your question till the end of time.
That's right. That's right.
You ruined the case. How could they do that? Didn't wait on the medical examiner.
Right. And there was an issue, like the defense tried to make a little bit of an issue about that at trial. It was very interesting though, because they actually tried to say one of the investigators, I can't remember. I think it was the crime scene technician. They tried to say, well, aren't you supposed to get permission? Well, we don't answer to the medical examiner.
Right.
We don't need permission. And they said, yes, we would normally have those conversations. Unfortunately, that just didn't work out. But there was some questioning about that, about, him having taken them there on the scene. But then the medical examiner, who had just retired like 8 days before he testified. So he had been there for, I think he had said he had done like over 9,000 autopsies in his career. He had, 20 some years of experience. He's actually a Harford County resident. And so they asked him about it, what his thought was on that. He was like, I was fine with it. If they needed the evidence, they should take it. And I was like, well, that worked out beautifully.
Yeah.
It ended up being a complete non-issue.
And backing up just a little bit, because I know that before you became, state attorney, you here were the violent crime, supervising attorney. So this is not something new to you. Every time you see something so brutal, so violent, so senseless, it has to affect you as a human level. But then, of course, there's the professional side of you. Mm-hmm. Can you give people a little insight what that's like, where you are still a human being seeing a brutal death, a brutal homicide in front of you, but you have to keep your wits about you to make these tough calls so that you can seek justice for Rachel, who's in front of you?
So I will say, I've obviously seen plenty of murders. This was horrifically violent. Those pictures, like they're ingrained, I'll never unsee them. That scene, I'll never unsee. But, when you get there, at that point, my prosecutor brain is on, right? Like, I'm sad for her. I'm sad for her children. I developed relationships with her family and her children, obviously, during this case. And it's all tragic. And, the personal side of me feels terrible about the whole thing. But when I'm there in that role, I'm like, but my job is to get justice for them, right? And the only way I can do that is if I keep my professional hat on and just focus on what we're doing. Because even before the DNA, when they showed up, Detective Wilsinski, who was basically the primary crime scene technician in this one, he was like, here's this, here's that. And finally I said, just give me the flashlight. And I was just walking around looking at all the things because I wanted to just take it all in, so that it worked out that was the right call, because there was actually one witness who testified, one of our sheriffs, who he answered something on cross-examination, and I looked at my deputy state's attorney and I said, that's not how it happened. And so I hunted through for a picture, to whatever. And he said, oh yeah, I wasn't there for that part, but yes, you are correct. That's what happened. So on redirect, I was able to do it. But if I hadn't gone, that wouldn't have been one of those things I would have picked up on, in a normal case. But you really have to put your professional hat on and just say, like, this is terrible. And it's all, very emotional. It's graphic. It's all things, but it's also terrible. And the only thing I can do for them, right, is to get them justice, which is to make sure we do this case right.
So you have a crime like this, and I'm sure initially the question is this targeted? Is it someone she knows? I know she had just started dating someone, so obviously those people are going to fall under suspicion. As you said, you then get that DNA and you put it in CODIS, and it hits on a crime all the way across the country in California. Tell us a little bit about that.
So, and the first thing that happened was the CODIS hit. We put it in CODIS. They had a hit. Unfortunately, it was one that was unsolved. So it didn't give us a name. It just gave us a matching crime scene. So what that enabled us to do, so it was a situation where there was a party at a house and an individual had broken in. Everybody was kind of going to bed, sort of middle of the night. And so the kids were upstairs. Mom was asleep. I really passed out, on the couch. And the daughter hears like a noise downstairs. She walks down. She's 9. She walks down the steps, sees mom no longer on the couch, but on the floor. And then the dog sort of draws her attention, and she sees what we now know is the defendant under the table, like hiding under the table in the dining room. And so he's like, oh, your mom needs an ice pack. She fell and hit her head. Like at that point, he's sort of, making nice, distracting her. And so she goes into the freezer to get like a corn, like, or peas or something. And when she turns around, he attacks her and like has her up against the wall, like by her throat, and is strangling her. Her brother, who is almost 18, or I think it might have been his 18th birthday, comes downstairs, hears the noise, comes down and sort of interrupts this, picks up like a chair, to whatever, and sort of skedaddles him basically out of the house. What we were able to get from that helped us tremendously was that we were able to get that Ring camera video that ultimately we released to the public. And it really was not a good picture of his face. It was more of a profile view, but we were able to get a race, a age range. So we knew he was Hispanic. We knew he was, we were sort of guessing late teens, early 20s, 20-ish years old is kind of where we were guessing based on the photo. They didn't know who he was. I mean, our sheriff's office flew out to California and interviewed all these people with the help of the Los Angeles detectives. But we were able to, that's what got us, the codicid is what got us sort of, at least we were on the track of a description of the person who did this.
So how do you get from, you have this description, but it's very vague. I remember seeing that video. It was all over the news. They were going all out, but we didn't know, is this somebody who's from the area? It felt like, and I can't remember if we discussed this on the podcast or not. I feel like someone asked about it, but the fact that you had a crime in California and then a crime in Maryland made you think this is somebody who moves around a lot, not somebody who has like a fixed location, which is going to make it even harder.
Doesn't have a whole lot of roots anywhere. Right?
Exactly. So you got some challenges here. It's not somebody she knew. It's somebody who isn't local. Yeah. No roots. How do you finally get his name?
Forensic genealogy is the answer to that. It is an incredible process. I think the state attorneys here have dubbed me the expert in this because I guess they want us to be like sort of the lead case here in Maryland because obviously the rules differ, state to state. So they came to me, actually the FBI had come to the Maryland State's Attorneys Association about forensic genealogy when I was coming into office. And so the captain of the criminal investigation division said, we want to do this. What do you think? And I said, I think we should do it. We don't have a name. Let's keep moving forward. It's worth a shot. So the FBI got involved, and without, our federal partners, none of this would have been, possible. HSI, FBI, they all were an incredible help. So they take a SNP profile, they put it into, sort of the public genealogy, places where people send their DNA voluntarily for ancestry or, looking for family members, that kind of thing. So in this case, I think it was GenMatch Pro, and there was another database. They used two databases, and they put it in. And they look for people that could be potential relatives. Or, obviously, you could get lucky and have the actual person in there. It's unlikely that generally doesn't happen. But it was what they used in the Golden State Killer murder cases. That's how they solved that. So anyway, they make a SNP profile of our DNA. They put it in. They find a series of people who may or may not. Now, not everyone. They're looking for people who have, the most matches. Just because you have some blocks are the same doesn't necessarily mean you're related, but they take the more blocks you have in common, the more likely you are to be related. And so from there, they use census information, birth certificates, all this public record stuff to form family trees of people and try to narrow it down. So at that point, we're making all these family trees, looking for individuals who fall within this Hispanic male, 20-ish years old, whatever. And they're going around and they're talking to people and getting consensual DNA swabs to see if they're related, that kind of thing. So, there were a series of family trees, but really in our case, all that did was really lead them to it was an investigative lead. We didn't actually talk about forensic genealogy in trial at all. We never even said those words because all it did was really lead them to the relative's house in Prince George's County. So they believed that he had an aunt in PG County. So the way they narrow it down and figure out which family tree is right, when they find people, is they narrow it by age, geographic location. So they have all these trees. Well, they were like, this one looks right because we have this guy who's a Hispanic 20-year-old, male. He's got a brother that we think is living in Los Angeles. So there was a connection there. And he's got these family members that live in Prince George's County in Maryland. So they sort of were like, well, let's go check out these people and see what we can figure out. They had gotten pictures of him, and I can't remember now if they were a combination of like when he tried to come over the border, maybe social media, but they had a couple pictures of him who they believed was him, at least the person they identified as Victor Martinez Hernandez. And so when they first got his name, ironically, the first time they ever heard his name was on Rachel's birthday. There was a lot of that. It was so strange. But so they were like, this is who we think it is. They came in, actually that whiteboard right up there, here. They came in and drew the family tree for me and said, we're going to go down and interview these people. And so really that didn't become evidence because we went to Prince George's County and met with the aunt and the cousin who said they showed him the pictures and they're like, yes, that's Victor. Well, they went down there twice. The FBI went first and Victor was actually still there the day they were there. And he, I think, was outside when they came up. And so when he came back in, he was like, who was that? And they were like, oh, they were from here and they were investigating. I think they told him what they were investigating, a murder and a rape. And I don't know if they asked his name. I think they did at that point, but they were like, do you know this person? Yes, he lived here for a bit. He's my nephew or my cousin, depending on which one you're talking to. So they immediately called the sheriff's office and said, you need to come down here and actually formally interview these people. So we did shortly thereafter. They went down. Hey, yep, that's him. He lived here. They were less than pleased with him at that point because he just wasn't a really great contributing member of the household, I don't think. So they were like, and we had brought the police to their house, which they were not, I think, thrilled about either. And they were like, did he happen to leave anything behind? They were like, yeah, he left all these dirty clothes and some shoes in the closet. And so literally the lead detective is sitting on the couch and when he asked them, they're like, yeah, they're right behind you, behind the couch there. And so he pulls out this bag of and they were like, can we take them? And they signed a consent to search because he had been gone at that point for like a month and a half to 2 months. So at that point it was abandoned property. So they took it and they swabbed it for DNA and then we got a match.
I like you working in the legal aspect. Wasn't a legal search and seizure because it was abandoned property.
No, I mean, that's really because they called. They were like, I'm like, no, take it. I mean, he's gone. He's been gone for, I think at that point it was June. I want to say they were there because we got their DNA results like immediately. The MSP rushed it for us. Wow. So it was June they were there. He had been gone since, I want to say May, like the beginning of May.
Did he take off because he knew y'all were investigating?
I think so, yes. And actually he took with him the FBI agent's card that he had left at the house for the cousins. So he ultimately, when they did the search and seizure warrant on the house he was living in Tulsa, when they arrested him, the card was in his backpack.
How did he have access to all of these places all over the country? Was it just family or he had... Okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah, he had figured out the busing system apparently because, I mean, that's my assumption because we found, again, when we did the search and seizure warrant, we found bus tickets when he did that traveling to Tulsa, tickets from like Memphis to Nashville and then Nashville to Tulsa. So he had clearly figured out how to navigate via bus.
So now you've got this guy. He's accused of committing this horrendous murder. You're having to get ready for what's going to be a very difficult trial. A lot of evidence that's going to have to come in. You're thinking about all that. But while that's happening, it comes out that, he's not here legally. He's from El Salvador, I believe.
We knew that when we had his tree and, as the investigation, we were trying to track him down, get evidence to connect him to get an arrest warrant. We had heard about all of this other stuff. I mean, we knew he was here illegally.
And he was fleeing from a murder charge in El Salvador, apparently.
Yep. The first time he tried to come across the border was like the day after that murder.
And very quickly, this becomes part of the national discussion about immigration. And then all of a sudden it's part of the presidential election.
Oh, yeah.
The governor's talking about it. Yep. I've got to imagine you're thinking, dying. I don't need any of this.
Dying. Yeah. Absolutely dying. Like begging these people to please stop talking. Like I love them all dearly, but I was like, please stop talking. And I kept telling them, do not talk about the facts. Do not, frankly, I don't want you to talk at all. But if you feel like you are going to talk, which they clearly were, I need you to stay away from the facts. If you want to say that illegal immigration, and connect it to Rachel's death, okay, I can't stop you. You have the right to do it. But
break this down, right? Break this down for everyone listening. Why? As the prosecutor who is investigating the case, going to bring this case to trial, why do you want everyone to stop talking? Why do you want people to not talk about the facts? So we kept telling them we wanted a Harford County jury to decide this case. And every jurisdiction is different, right? Like you get a different jury, you get, it's just, but we knew we wanted a Harford County jury. And so we knew, we were afraid that they were going to file for change of venue. Ultimately, they did. They hadn't for the longest time. Nothing. And I was like, great. And then it really started to build up. And I was like, okay. And so sure enough, we get to late in the game and they're filing a change of venue. And, one of the biggest, luckily the case law on that issue is on our side in Maryland. So, I felt good about what the law says in Maryland about that. But the bigger thing is in today's age, where are we going that people don't know about the Rachel Morren homicide? Like
The whole country knows about it. We're not finding a county in Maryland. We're not finding a state in the United States that doesn't know about this. So that was my biggest thing is I wanted a Harford County jury. And I thought our citizens deserved to have our county's jury decide this case. So that's why I wanted them. But I was dying through the whole thing. I mean,
and there's nothing you can say because what you're telling them not to do, you can't also then come out and say, guys, don't do this, or you can't make any statements about it.
No, and we have our Maryland Professional Rules of Conduct actually specifically say, so like even when we did the press conference on his arrest, I couldn't say anything about anything. I mean, Sheriff Gaylor could say what he did, but I had to be very specific about just this is the process moving forward. We can't do anything as prosecutors that raise publicity or pretrial awareness. We have to be very, very cautious about that. So I most definitely I definitely couldn't say anything. And I'm like, oh, Lordy, praying nobody says anything like too terrible to totally poison or says wrong things. That's the other part, right? Is you don't want them saying they like getting things mixed up. And not that they would say things on purpose wrong, of course. But, I was like, could everybody just wait till after we try this case, please? But didn't work out that way, but it's okay. It turned out fine.
Did that affect jury selection at all? Was that something that came up a lot?
No, I mean, most people, of course, had heard about this case. I mean, we asked the question, have you heard about this case? The entire room stood up, both days. We actually had set aside 3 days for jury selection. We actually got the jury picked in 2. So it really didn't hold us up because our case law is clear that they can know about the facts. They can have heard it in the news. They just have to be willing to set aside everything they've heard in the media and decide the case based solely on the facts that they hear in the courtroom. So a lot of people said they had seen it on social media, some more than others. Some had followed it. Some just had heard bits and pieces, it just depended. But we didn't really have too tough of a time for people saying, I'm willing to listen to the evidence and, decide based on what we hear in the courtroom. So we really didn't have a hard time. And to their credit, there were people who said, I just can't, right? I can't put aside everything I've heard. And I appreciate their honesty. And we had, jurors get excused and things, that these jurors that we had took this very seriously. Something, we'll just say inappropriate was said by a juror during the trial that got him excused during like a sidebar. And another juror is the one that brought it to our attention. So, and then we had to voir dire everyone around them and, make sure no one else had heard it. But, they took it very seriously, the instructions that Judge Curtin gave them. So we were very appreciative of that.
So obviously we were talking about all the national media attention on this, but you have a job to do. How do you, or does it affect you because you're such a seasoned prosecutor? How does added attention from people who don't know anything about the law on the case affect how you prepare a case, or does it?
I think knowing that there was going to be reporting on every single thing that happened in this case, I think caused me to probably, not that I prepared it any more or less than I would any case, but when I prepared what I was going to say in court to make sure I maybe even broke it down a little more than I normally would to make sure that whatever was being reported was accurate and that they could understand what was happening. And also, because of that, also breaking it down so the jury could understand it when we ultimately got to the trial phase. I am incredibly OCD when it comes to trial prep. So actually I could point over there. We have I'll show it to you since it's not visual. So that over there, I don't know if you can see that really large.
Yes.
That's all the binders. That's the Rachel Morren case.
Wow.
There were 9 of them. There are 10 now because I had a sentencing one. So we had them all broken down into like what we call the Bibles, which is the whole case file, basically all the reports, everything. And then I have my trial binders by witness and exhibits that are going in through that witness. So I'm incredibly just OCD generally in trial. So I don't know that I prepped it any differently than I would any case because I treat them all the same. Obviously, when all eyes are on you, you want to make sure all of your T's are crossed and I's are dotted, as they would say. And fortunately, in this case, everything went very, very smoothly.
I bet you're like most prosecutors. The best part's when the trial actually starts. You're done with all the prep, and now you're doing it.
Going.
There. And you guys, you must have presented a pretty convincing case because it is rare to have a jury that reaches a guilty verdict in less than an hour. on a first degree murder case, but you got that.
I mean, when they came back with a verdict that quickly, it was, I think we got the call in like 51, and then I found out it was the light went on in 46 minutes or whatever. I said the good news is with the evidence we had, there's no way they all got to not guilty that quickly, right? So I actually I felt very good about where we were at that point. But this case was, it was rock solid. The sheriff's office, I can't sing their praises enough about what a great job they did on this case. His DNA was, it was on her wrist. It was on her, everywhere she had marks, breasts, on her neck, inside of her, on her watch, which wasn't even where she was. It was across the trail, completely on the other side of the trail. So his DNA was just everywhere. And then we also had, so I don't know if you know this part of it, but our digital forensics examiner here is incredible. What Megan Waltmeyer did in this case. So her phone was, as I said, the water was deeper at the end of the tunnel. Her phone was found in that water at the end of the tunnel. Smashed. It was like the frame was bent. It was completely smashed. Hilariously on scene, I see our supervisor at FSU putting it taking it in the water and putting it in a bag. And I'm like, what are you doing? I'm yelling, and he's like, Megan said, and I'm like, okay, if Megan said, that's fine. But apparently something I learned from this is that the second you take it out of the water into the air, it starts to corrode. And that's when you start losing information. So she said, I need it to stay in the water until I can get my hands on it.
Wow.
So we literally took the creek water in a plastic bag, sealed it up with the phone, and delivered it to her in the water.
That's
and I was
fascinating.
like, no rice? And she's like, no, Allison, not rice. And I'm like, okay. So she ultimately took it, and we got very lucky because the thing that stores your data on your phone is not your SIM card. It's called the logic board. And so he had damaged the left side of the phone, but the logic board was on the right side of the phone. So the logic board was still intact. So she got a donor phone, so basically the same phone, took it apart, took the logic board out, and put Rachel's logic board in that phone and turned it on, and it was her phone. It was her wallpaper. It was her everything. And so she was able to pull probably the most important stuff was her health data that was transmitting from her watch to the phone. And so we were able to see the two biggest pieces. We were able to see when her three things. Her headphones came out, so we argued that was when the attack had started or when they stopped, right? Because if you take one out. And we were also able to put that together with the last text to her children, which were at 7:04, and then watching her energy burned as she walked down the trail, and then it drained off, and then she started to fight back, and then downhill. Same thing with her heart rate. And so we were able to see that basically this entire thing took like 4 to 6 minutes from the health data. And so we argued that, you don't commit a crime like this in 4 to 6 minutes unless you have a plan, right? You have to know what the plan is and execute it. So we used that for the premeditation element, but the phone was a huge piece. The digital evidence was a huge piece of this as well, in terms of how fast I think they came to the verdict. He also lied to the police 16 ways to Sunday, didn't help himself there. So we had all that and not good stuff on his phone that they'd also ultimately seized from him. But that health data was huge, huge.
So this does sound like an incredibly rock solid case. We have this conviction in 46 minutes. A question a lot of people ask, both, you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. With all that evidence, why did he go to trial? People ask. And then if he were to plead guilty, people say, why didn't he go to trial and fight it? He has nothing to lose. So in this case, why did it go to trial?
He maintains his innocence. Maybe he told the police, when I tell you he is through sentencing, when the judge was talking to him, there was no expression from him at all. It is actually kind of disturbing. There was some smirking during trial, particularly during graphic photos, which was a bit disturbing. But when they confronted him during his interview, because he agreed to talk to the police, he actually asked for an attorney in Tulsa. A public defender came and he agreed to talk to him with the attorney present. I'm still baffled. But during that, they were like, but how did your DNA get on our crime scene? Because at that point, he was saying he had never been to Maryland. I've never been to Maryland. I've never been to Maryland. Meanwhile, we ended up having, after that, Wi-Fi connections on. We put him in Maryland 1,000 different ways where he worked after we knew he was denying it. But he denied being in Maryland. They're like, but how is your DNA? And he said, Fatima, I cannot make this up, Fatima from El Salvador, who is some lady who was interested in him, and he scorned her, I guess, and chose to be with his baby's mother, didn't like him, was out to get him, and maybe she brought his DNA here from El Salvador.
From El Salvador, not
Wow.
even from like wherever.
Because they were like,
Wow.
maybe she brought my hair, and they're like, no, it's not that kind of DNA. And Fatima did it.
There you go.
That's bold lying right there.
It was. I mean, his statements were just so, even to this day, he's still like, and when Dr. Witzak, and his psychosexual confronted him with the murder, the alleged murder, of course, that's not here. All we have is the red notice, but, in El Salvador, apparently also Fatima was involved in that. It's,
We should really get Fatima.
Fatima is magic. Apparently.
Yeah, we should really get Fatima.
I was like, I want to meet her. I want to find out who Fatima
Sorceress.
is. Meet her. Exactly. I think the defense, they didn't have any. Their closing was, for a murder case, relatively short, I thought, because they just went with, she had sex with her boyfriend, the morning she went missing. We didn't find her till 30 hours later or whatever it is. And why is his DNA not inside of her? There must be an error with the DNA, so they just sort of went that route. But they didn't have a DNA expert to say it's wrong, nothing like that. I, in rebuttal, just basically said, I swear I said this, I'm going to ask you to use your common sense. What woman do you know that has morning sex and doesn't take a shower afterwards?
Excellent. Yes.
Common sense. Yeah.
Common sense.
Showers, it washes away DNA. It's
That's
a thing,
right.
And the boyfriend couldn't say that she had showered for sure, but he said generally she was a morning shower,
Right.
Whatever. And we just went with that. But
Will he be extradited to El Salvador for any crimes there, or is it
Nope.
it's done?
nope, he will be here for
Life without
life
parole.
without plus life plus 40 was his ultimate sentence. So, my thing is our judges can't sentence him to jail in El Salvador, right? We have no jurisdiction to do that. We can only sentence him to our jails here. So if they deport him, he's free, right? So one, he's going to be right back here. Let's just be honest. Two, even if he's not, he will rape and murder somebody else. There's no question.
Oh, absolutely.
He 100% will hurt somebody else. And for me, while I understand there's a cost to housing him for the rest of his life, like no amount of money is worth another human being's life. So he will be in Maryland in the Division of Correction for the rest of his life.
No,
Well,
thanks
that's
for
the
explaining
best.
all of that, because
Best outcome.
absolute best outcome.
That's right.
And this is exactly one of those cases, like you said. But for you putting him in prison, someone else would be another victim. Not just someone,
I
but
said that in
someone's.
sentencing because of like his psychosexual and all the information we had. I was like, it's not a question of if, it is when.
Right.
He will rape and murder someone else.
It wouldn't surprise me if he's not responsible for other crimes.
Right.
Oh, I would 100% not be. If something popped up, it would not surprise me in the least. Not even a little bit.
Check the bus paths.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
I think we said this. So it's truly check the bus paths. I bet when it was unsolved in California, I'm feeling utter relief. That family, like they have answers now too. It's horrendous. This could have happened obviously to them, but for the 18-year-old brother, who knows what would have happened.
Well, thankfully we solved it. So any CODIS hits in the future, thankfully, will now not just be a match to a crime scene, but a match to a name.
Right.
So last I heard, I don't think they're going to charge him in California because it's
He has
not
life
worth it.
here. Right.
Yeah. Right. So it was one of those, I think they probably would have if we weren't successful, but for what, all that traveling and, extraditing him back and forth and all that just isn't worth it. So I haven't spoken to them personally, but my understanding from law enforcement is that they're not.
Sure. We always say resources are finite, especially in prosecution. He's going to be locked up. Fantastic.
That's right.
That's incredible. Obviously, that wasn't the only case you were working on. It's one of the largest cases really in our country in the last couple of years. Thank you for your service, because I know the amount of work that goes into that. And I also have to say this, at the same time that you were investigating and prosecuting this, many other high profile cases were falling victim really to conspiracy theories and kind of this whole true crime world of improper armchair detectiving, shall I say. This case, I did not see fall victim to that. And I think part of that is the way that you messaged and built such a strong case. Like you said, you prepared this case like you would any, but there's nothing to pick apart in the case that you put
left
together.
no stone unturned. Even once we still investigated even after we had him, right? And because when he said I wasn't in Maryland, I was like, oh, no. So then I was like, we had found out he was working at Popeyes. We found out who he was living with. We found out. And so we ended up getting all of those witnesses after he was arrested, because I was like, we need to debunk every single, we are not leaving any stone unturned here. And it really doesn't, like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. We know he was here because DNA's here. We're not just going to leave it to that, right? We're going to have people to put him here. It was interesting because when his family testified from PG County, I think he really didn't believe they were going to come. I think he really didn't think they were going to testify. And I did notice there was no change really, but his body language changed a little bit. Like, it was almost like a surprised look when they started walking in,
They were probably his victims, right? I mean, they probably were afraid of him for a long time.
I mean, they didn't have much of a relationship with him in El Salvador. And his cousin had been here for I think almost a decade at that point. He's here legally or has citizenship. I don't know how he got here originally, but he's documented now. But his aunt, they got in touch with them, and then he went there and couldn't keep a job and was just kind of freeloading off of them. So they had, I think, had their fill. But I mean, even then they had a picture of him with the cousin, the female cousin, and they showed it to him during the interview. This is taken of you in Prince George's County, and literally, I don't know where the picture came from. And then he's like, they said Edith Hernandez, which is his aunt, who, I don't know who that person is.
Well, there you go. Commitment to the bit, right?
I was watching that interview oh my, it was a wild ride for sure watching it. But I was like, we're going to keep investigating, and debunk everything. We didn't leave any stone unturned. And to their credit, Sheriff's Office did a phenomenal job.
Well, I want to echo Allison congratulating you and everybody on your team on this case.
Thank you.
I'm sure it was not easy, and the weight is very heavy because you have not only the victim, but her family and everyone else that you're fighting for. We said we would respect your time. We're not going to keep you all night. You've been very generous up to this point, but I always like to ask this question of active prosecutors. We have a lot of young people who listen to the podcast, people who are going to law school, people who want to be prosecutors, people who just started as prosecutors. What advice do you have to folks who are just getting into this profession?
So I think there's a couple of things that I say, particularly to our, early prosecutors. The biggest thing is the only thing you have is your reputation. No case is worth your reputation. Integrity is absolutely the most important thing. Our job is not just to get convictions, right? It's to get justice and to do the right thing. But no case is worth your reputation. So that's number one. Number two, when you're first getting into this profession, try cases. Don't shy away from them. Don't just plead things out, to resolve cases. You learn by doing. I mean, that's just, I tell our district court prosecutors all the time, I tried, I don't know how many cases in district court, a lot. I was on the DV district court docket for a long time, and those are very heavily trial cases. But try cases, it'll help you learn the rules of evidence. It'll help you learn how to present things, what works, what doesn't work. Also, what your style is, because my style and my deputy state's attorney, who we tried this case together, he is very polished and put together. I am much more rogue. I am. And, we laugh about it, about how we work so well together, but we are very different prosecutors. We just are. But, and watching seasoned prosecutors, right? That's, I think, the third piece of advice is go and watch, because you also get to see how other prosecutors do it. You can try on different hats, and see how other people are doing, but also see what the best practices are. Learn how to handle expert witnesses. I watched our veteran prosecutors when I was a young prosecutor anytime they had big trials. So I think those are the three big pieces. And, obviously go to the veterans in your office if you have questions, and, don't be afraid to ask questions, and, that type of stuff. So I think those are the three biggest pieces of advice that I would have for young prosecutors is, don't be afraid to do it. You learn by doing it, try cases.
Some of the best advice I think anyone can have. You guys just got it free right here from the woman, the legend. Truly, thank you. Thank you for continuing to talk about these cases, because by hearing, we always say this, part of the reason we started this podcast is you don't hear from the prosecution. So hearing what it's like to be on the investigative team, to, have to make these hard choices, I think really enlightens the entire true crime community. So thank you for taking time tonight to talk to us and for your continued service. Baltimore, Harford County thanks you, but also our entire nation thanks you for this. Allison, you are welcome on our show anytime that you have time to come on. We'd love to have you back on.
Let me know. I'm always happy to do it.
So, guys, you heard her here. This has been one of the most engaging interviews we've had the privilege to have. Allison, thank you for being here. But until next time, I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And I'm Allison Healey.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. you've listened to our conversation with Ivan, you know that we're very conversational.
Yeah, I did listen to it.
But I currently feel very bad that we made you go back to the office.
I was telling Brett, I talked to Ivan, I was like, I learned things about you that I didn't know. I knew a lot of it, but there were things I didn't even know.
Well, that was an awesome interview. There were so many things, because, you know, he has a lot of public persona.
Hey,
hello, everyone. Yeah.
So I was really glad that he decided to come on and introduce us to you as well.
Yes, that was very great of him.
Okay, super late for you. Do we want to go ahead and get started?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, I'll do my short sign off.
September, CBS hits are streaming free on Pluto TV.
I'm coming in hot.
For this month only, you can watch full seasons of the CBS shows you love. From the courtroom drama of Matlock to the heroics of Fire Country. Go back to where it all began in NCIS Origins, or watch the hilarious hauntings of ghosts, all for free. Full seasons of the CBS shows you love. This month only on Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.